Hello and welcome to Autistic Radio. This is the uncut recording of a podcast. If you want to hear the edited version, go to our website. Spectrum Voices Conversation is sponsored by coldpack.co.uk for practitioners using cryotherapy, osteopaths, chiropractors, physiotherapists. They produce a cold pack which has your details printed on the pack and reminds your patients about you for referrals. If you use our website as an end user, everything that you spend on that website goes directly to the charity Autistic Association to support the work of Autistic Radio. And now, Harry, let's take it away with the show.
Thanks, Jules. Hello, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 30th of November 2025, St Andrew's Day in Scotland. Some people celebrate it, some people are not aware of it. But let's go to the first post, which is from Aurora Consulting, who are based in Scotland, a disability service business consultant. Aurora is an autistic-owned business offering organisations bespoke training and consulting. And they've shared the following. This is a wee story about autistic determination and how I learned that I am in charge of me. I'm sitting in my art class after lunch. It's the 30th of November 1992. It's standard grade art, and the less talented of us generally get left to crack on with things, leaving a lot of time for chat and relaxing. A girl called Emma and I are talking, and the subject of vegetarians comes up. I'd been considering becoming vegetarian ever since I'd heard it was even a thing. Emma argues that vegetarians can't be healthy. I argue they could. It's all friendly. Emma and I are on good terms, and eventually one of us suggests a bet. A bet that I would be vegetarian for 1 month and would see how healthy I was after that. And that, dear readers, is how I became veggie. It was genuinely something I wanted to do, but I had no idea if I could make that decision. I needed a push. A reason to go ahead, and a friendly bet was apparently the thing that would make it so. My family had no notice, but those of you who know me well know I am nothing if not determined. I'd made that bet, I was going to stick to it. It didn't go down well. The number of veggie options available in 1992 were nowhere as near as plentiful as they are today. And I worked with my lovely home economics teacher to make sure I was getting enough nutrients. My home ec teacher wasn't convinced of the wisdom of my actions either, but she liked a challenge and was keen to see how I'd get on. Vegetarians in my wee town were few and far between. She hadn't taught many. She even told me that if I wanted to pass home economics, I had to cook some non-veggie meals. They sometimes got passed on to my chemistry teacher, as his was the class after home economics. After the Christmas holidays, we decided I'd won the bet and had a good laugh, and I decided I liked being vegetarian, so never went back. This is absolutely not a post encouraging others to become veggie too. It's a completely personal choice, and it's not going to be right for everyone. I'm also one of those veggies who happily prepares meat for other people. But this post is about autistic determination. So many people telling me it was a bad idea. So much pressure to just buy the tuna sandwich I previously enjoyed. So many people telling me I couldn't do it. So I did. And that's how I learned that I was in charge of me, not anyone else. I am so grateful for Emma for making that bet with me. I don't think either of us knew how life-changing it would be. And the picture of me is enjoying some Ethiopian veggie food last year and thoroughly enjoying it. Vegiversary, vegetarian, autistic determination. What's your thoughts? The reason that I shared it was just something that came up today, of course. And the vegetarian thing, even now, comes with prejudice. I'm not vegetarian myself, but I'm aware of people who are, and the sort of kind of attitudes towards it. But then that's people that I am not aware of autistic. But if you're autistic and want to be vegetarian, you can see the double whammy on it in terms of, oh no, you don't know what you're doing, oh no, you're going too far. And I just like that determination story of not doing something reckless, but doing something that you believe in and making sure, that you're healthy, but making sure that you do things your own way. And if you experience and make a decision to maybe even revert or change your mind, that is still your decision. I think that can be taken a lot of ways because a lot of people, especially autistic people, feel like they're being told what to do and they're kind of stuck in their shell and unable or feeling trapped from making their own decisions.
I think my experience of autism is different, but sharing something. When I was very young, possibly 10, I was exposed to farming and the market where the animals were sold that would then be eaten. Rabbits, chickens, turkeys, these kinds of things, and the conditions that they were kept in when they were being sold at this Saturday market. That made me inquire as a young autistic boy, with all that overwhelming smell around it, about the meat, and I decided to become vegetarian at 10 years old, which was okay at home, but then I went to boarding school, and the determination came in when I was bullied, because I was told by the 18-year-olds that the reason that they weren't getting enough meat or whatever in their diet was because I had come as a vegetarian. So that carried on for some time, and I continued to be vegetarian, being bullied about it. But eventually it all stopped and I had stood up for myself, but I had come to a slightly different feeling in my head that it wasn't necessary to be vegetarian. It was necessary to be kind to animals and to reduce the amount of meat I had in my diet and find other ways. So for the rest of my life, I've not been vegetarian, but I've been a whole food diet person with lots and lots of different types of food. And just sticking to something because you're told not to, I think, is one of the detriments that come with autism rather than one of our credits. I understand what Aurora Consulting is saying about having the strength to stick to our guns, but sometimes we stick to our guns when the motivation for sticking out our guns isn't logical.
It's an education, isn't it? An education in lifestyle options and choices. You can do things when you're a teenager or a young person, then you'll change maybe a decade later or 5 years later, or you'll just continue with it because it stays with you and it's for you. Um, but exploration and self determination, which I think is the theme of this post, is something worth considering. You know, because very often we get caught in the trap of expectations and normativity.
I like what Robbie's saying in the text, and I think this was actually said in the post as well, is it shouldn't be imposed on anyone else. Just because you've made a decision, like you're vegetarian, you shouldn't impose on others. And I've seen that happen, not face to face, but I've seen it happen in media, for instance. That I'm vegetarian, I'm good, and if you're a meat eater, you're bad, you're part of the problem. And I think that's what caused the animosity between people. I mean, there's lots of vegetarians that I know that it's not necessarily about, the ethics of, the meat processing, the meat trade and slaughtering of animals, although they'll have sympathy towards it. It's just more to what they like, and they feel they should have the choice to do that and without being criticised, as long as they don't criticise others. And when it comes to when you're autistic, it can be both ways. I mean, I know that when I've done certain things, not particularly that sort of, but when I've been really into something, it's like I've not tried to force anybody to do it, but it's like I talk about like an obsession. It's like I found out this way and it's the right way. Join me. Why do you do another way? That's not so much the right way. So it's the same sort of thing. And that's how kind of animosity can happen, relationships, family, because especially when it's parenting, some would find that, that really it's just a child just playing up as well. And it just depends who it is in the situation, but it does hit home, the post itself and the conversations that we're having.
I'm sceptical. I've not come across a situation where somebody who's vegetarian has tried to impose it on other people. Where I have come across people being ridiculed for being vegetarian and found difficult, I think it's way in the other direction in general society. But if you are saying that people speak out against the cruelty that happens in regular farming that we all try to pretend isn't there, then yes, they can come across as political. They are making a political statement that they believe that the farming practices that we have are cruel. And even with the best will in the world, that's true. They are cruel. I don't see these radical vegetarians personally. I see them characterised in the right-wing press, and I don't see the reality of it.
Is this a situation where meat eating is seen as normal and everything else is seen as different?
Possibly so, Ray, because my experience at school was that I just wanted not to eat meat, and the interpretation of the people around me was that because I was doing that, it was affecting them in some way. And it affects people in two ways. They see somebody making a moral stand about the cruelty that happens in farming, and they are unwilling to make that link themselves, so they feel criticised, and they come against vegetarians. They blame them because they don't want to hear that message.
I do get your point about, you get stereotyped in all sorts of media, but the right-wing media is very good at stereotyping. They're very good at stereotyping autistic people, for a start. But the thing I was talking about was more about people who, because they've been bombarded with criticism, there's many vegetarians, or they appear to be vegetarians, obviously you never really know. It's a defensive thing. It's like they're fighting back because they're getting hammered themselves, so it's a fight back thing. But I would say you're right though, that it's the other way. It's more about the meat. It's very minimal, and thinking about it. But it's a social media thing I was looking at, and what I've seen in some messages I've seen. But you never know. Some could be bots, right enough. So who knows? But the message is definitely there.
In the text, Robbie says that there was an individual that tried to impose vegetarianism on him. And he also grew up with having religion imposed upon him. And he does believe that some farming practices are unnecessarily cruel.
The next post is from Rebecca Duffus, specialist teacher and autism advocate, an educational consultant, PSC, PGCE, MA, autism education, experience supporting young people, families in education settings. And they share the following. I'm so excited to finally share this. I've just signed a contract with Routledge for my third book, or 5 if you count the workbook and guidebook. And once again I'll be collaborating with the brilliant Lyric, aka Neurodivergent Rebel, our third book together. Our new project is Autism Identity in Me, a practical workbook to empower adults. So many adults tell us that after hearing you are autistic, they are left without guidance on what comes next. At the Autism and ADHD show this year, countless parents bought my youth workbook to use for themselves, which just shows the gap for post-diagnostic support for all ages. And so, Lyric and I are creating the adult version you've been asking for. The workbook will offer practical, affirming support to help adults process their diagnosis or self-discovery, build a positive autistic identity, and understand what being autistic means for them. I can't wait to share more as we bring this to life. Autism Identity in Me, Adult Autism, Neurodiversity, Autism Acceptance, new book. What's your thoughts?
I don't think it's easy to get a contract with Routledge, so kudos for that.
It's something that has been repeated time and time again. Probably, as Robbie says in the text, it's like there's no support for neurodivergent adults, and this is definitely needed. It's like it's a message that has to be repeated because people who've been diagnosed or self-identified as autistic, in adulthood, late adulthood, well after childhood, feel that once that discovery is made, once that identity is made, diagnosis, whatever you want to call it, it's like there's no steps forward after it. It's like you have to do it yourself. You have to sort of roam and get the feelers out to see what's out there because there's a lack of guidance. And that's very worrying that exists. So a book like this, and hopefully so many others like this, will definitely be very helpful for many people out there. The next post is from Blue Sky Learning. It's a mental health service. We support neurodivergent individuals globally with coaching, counselling and consulting services, and they're based in Canada. And they shared the following. Are you an autistic individual who feels like some social situations are like navigating a maze with no map? Perhaps you overthink every conversation in your head, wondering what could have went differently. This overthinking is your brain trying to process complex social information and predict outcomes in environments that aren't always intuitive. What may seem minor to others can feel overwhelming, exhausting, or stressful. Some common signs of autistic overthinking in social situations include rehearsing conversations before or during interactions, analysing every word, gesture, or facial expression, worrying about how others perceive you, over-planning responses or what to say next, second-guessing your words or actions, struggling to initiate conversation or respond spontaneously, hyper-focusing on social rules or expectations, ruminating on past interactions or mistakes, and avoiding social situations due to anxiety or anticipation or judgment. These patterns are not flaws. They are adaptive strategies your brain uses to make sense of a social world that doesn't always accommodate neurodivergent thinking. At Blue Sky Learning, our neurodiversity affirming therapists and coaches help you navigate social overthinking, build confidence, and create practical strategies that honour your brain's way of processing information without shame or self-blame. Together, we can shift from why can't I just be normal to how can I engage socially in a way that feels safe and manageable for me. You can book a free 20-minute consult at the website shared, or you can send an email to the email address shared. We also offer consulting for inclusive workplaces and schools. Based in Toronto Therapy. I'll forget that, I'll leave that in the edit. What's your thoughts?
This is an intro. I just wonder how they actually do it. I suppose I'd have to go to their site and read into what they're offering as practical strategies that honour the brain's way of processing information without shame or self-blame. But I do identify a lot with these common signs.
Robbie shares in the post. Support is generic with social worker budgeting the autistic person's own money. And also he says, My anxiety is based on lack of self-esteem due to a lifetime of negativity towards me. And I think many people be feeling that as well.
I think that's what's referred to in the post as adaptive strategies to early trauma.
What stands out to me is while I was reading it, it just described me in so many ways. The thing every now and again I think of a mistake, something that's probably minor in the grand scheme of things, or no doubt will be, but it haunts you. It's a sort of kind of waking up and, oh, I remember that I said the wrong thing to someone, and not as something that was insulting to someone, but basically I said the wrong thing which embarrassed me for asking it or saying it. But as far as I'm aware, it didn't cause too much impact on the other person. But it was all about me actually saying it and behaving that way. Not behaving, but more just saying the word. Something simple. But it haunts you. I go back to conversations and situations I have in school. I left school nearly 30 years ago. And some are kind of traumatic because it felt like it must be traumatic if I'm still talking about it now and it's still in my head. But it's just like as the post says, about the so-called simple things and the so-called, it shouldn't be a problem, but there's no understanding that it can be a problem. Because I do remember in childhood and school, I used to talk about the one thing over and over and over again to my friends. Were basically saying, stop talking about it, stop thinking about it, get over it. And although they were trying to be doing it in a nice way, obviously I was boring them as well because I was so obsessive about a mistake that I felt I'd made and feeling that I had no way to fix it. But I tried to fix it anyway. And that was long before I was diagnosed. But it just shows you how deep it can become.
Is there an implication in this post that autistic people are intuitive or respond to intuitive environments? Because I've highlighted this sentence here, which was confusing me. This overthinking is your brain trying to process complex social information and predict outcomes in environments that aren't always intuitive. So, who's intuitive here?
I actually had to look this word up. Although I could have asked you, Ray, what it meant. And it was saying it's using or based on what one feels need to be true, even without conscious reasoning, being instinctive. So, autistic people are kind of automatic and work on instinct. I don't know, I'm just kind of chatting more here, kind of thinking out loud, but it's like I read the word and I thought, oh, I know what that means, and then all of a sudden my mind went blank.
Is it true, though, that all autistic people are instinctive?
Well, maybe it's simplifying it a bit, but I think sometimes it needs to be simplified. But maybe somebody else can come up with something. I'm just kind of havering a bit here because I'm not sure myself.
Yeah, Teresa says in the text, I think they mean something else, and it might be that instead of intuitive, we read not complex social information. Let's put it that way.
So my take on it would be that, like, to be intuitive is to be able to spot a pattern, like, of to be able to, like, take the data in and, like, notice the pattern, to be able to then predict what's going to happen. And in social situations in the past, before I kind of got some sort of dots filled in for me, I would be trying to, like, spot the pattern in a social situation, but I hadn't understood that a person could have like bad intentions, or could just really not want things to go well between us, or whatever it was. And so it would be really hard for me to spot a pattern if it meant somebody was coming from a place that's just really hard, like really not conceivable for me, like doesn't quite enjoys hurting people, that kind of thing.
I agree with Nicola. I think her description of what intuition is really lovely. I mean, if I try to add a bit more, it'll sound like mansplaining. For me, intuition is your brain working things out unconsciously in a way that you can't really get a handle on, but the results to you are real. But the results come in a feeling about somebody that then goes into a thought, rather than being able to logically think it through. And I think the possibility is that autistic people are slightly more intuitive. They are dealing with things at that level more than regular folk, because regular folk are also dealing with the social interaction and the social patterns. Instead, they're doing it in a different way. And there's a link here to empathy. People often use the word intuition when what they're doing is they're empathizing with somebody similar to themselves, and therefore they can predict them, and they call that intuition. If there's the double empathy paradigm, where autistic people empathize easily with other autistic people and can predict them from patterns because we know each other, we know what it feels like, and the same for non-autistic people, they empathize with each other following the patterns of expectation. It could be that we also have to learn an intuition that goes with this other group that are different to us, and that's a difficulty. But in my experience, often it's autistic people that have compensated the whole of their lives to learn both sets of skills, and it seems like a social slur on us when we are described as less empathetic or lacking the intuitive understanding of a social situation, because some of us, many of us, have had to negotiate both situations so much. And what Teresa responds to my words by saying, yes, Jules, but the flow isn't there with the others. The flow isn't there for us.
The next post is from Embrace Autism. Mental Health Service, Science Website, Diagnostic Centre. Research-based information empowerment by autistic for autistics. Embrace your advantages. Based in Canada. And what they've shared is the following. They say that unlike most non-autistics, autistic people can switch between local and global processing as needed. And the following post explains what this actually means. And I'll read just a part of it. And it's part of a local and global processing autism paper, which was published on 9th of April 2021, but was last updated November 29th, 2025. So they say, first let's do a quick test to see if you use local or global processing. And it shows a picture, and it says take a quick look at the image below and then scroll past the image until you cannot see it anymore. Take a quick look at the image below and scroll past until you cannot see it any longer. And they say if the image is now out of view, describe what you saw. If you said words like a beach or a vacation, then you're a global processor. You are a person who turns pieces of information into a meaningful whole. If, instead, you said words like a chair, an umbrella, the ocean, a sailboat, a ball, or sand, you are a local processor, a person who focuses on the details. And, as it turns out, autistic people tend to be local processors. In a paper from 2006, Laurent Montron et al. Described a local processing preference as one of the 8 enhanced perpetual abilities of autistics. And this begins a 9-part series on enhanced perceptual functioning in autism, with this post focusing on Principle 1 of the revised Enhanced Perceptual Functioning EPF model. And what it says is, the global processing style refers to attending to the gestalt, an organisation whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts, of a stimulus or processing information in a more general and big picture way. Whereas local processing style refers to attending to the specific details of a stimulus or processing information in a narrower and more detailed oriented way. What's people's thoughts on this?
Okay, I think it's hokum, but it might have a grain of truth in it. That's the problem for me. I've seen these kind of tests often, and you put them across the whole population and different people say different things. But it looks to me as though we're jumping to something before there's been a lot more work and study on it. I'm normally really willing to accept this contributor, but there's something about the science here that doesn't ring for me. There's something about it. Whenever you get into these sciences that are about how humans work psychologically, we have to be incredibly careful. We're classifying people. When I look at that picture, I am likely to give both sets of information. I'm likely to also look at how the question is framed. And if it says what was it you saw, I would give the global. And in other ways of phrasing, I might pick out the individuals afterwards. So I might actually say, here's the global picture, followed by here are the details that I remember from it, to then support my assertion of the global. I'm concerned if autistic people are put in these categories of details only people, when so often we are the global picture people as well. It seems to me that different incidents in laboratory conditions create different outcomes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't going to speak today, but this is really making me want to. You know what? I can do both. I'm sure, I suspect we all can do both. I would be more likely to say, if we're going to generalize like this post is, autistic people can do both. I slow down at the start and I get all of the details before I make the big global assumption, and it helps me enormously in the work that I do. And like Jules, I'm not really into, it's like you're in first year university psychology class and they ask you if you see an old woman or whatever the other thing is. That's it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, when I was actually seeing the post and I seen the paper, the link that was part of it, I was taken by surprise about how it was kind of worded. But I've shared a lot from Embrace Autism before, and a lot made sort of sense. Especially after we've had discussion on here, because sometimes it kind of looks a bit, and then we kind of talk about it a bit, and it makes kind of sense. And and usually a positive way. That it's a lot of positive stuff comes from this organisation, but this one does feel a bit iffy. It just seems like a lot of assumptions are made here, and it's trying to simplify autism. But I think going through the journey of that is probably, that's going to come up. I mean, it's been said, Robbie says in the text, it's like putting people in boxes, and I agree with that. It does feel like that, even if it's not intending to be a negative, because everybody's different. And we've said in other posts, and I think Embrace Autism has said as well, everybody's different. Everybody who's autistic is different and should be put in boxes and should be stereotyped, but it feels this way, feels it's going towards that sort of direction, whether it intends to or not.
Yeah, I'm picking up from what Robbie has said as well. He says generalising is harmful. Now, I'm sure that there's some kind of work that's gone on behind this. And who the hell am I to criticise scientists who think long and hard and put their studies together? However, when these pieces of information that they're still working on and still getting their heads around come out here into the public sphere, they can be dangerous to us, and it's unhelpful. In the same way that people are talking about monotropism, saying that autistic people have a propensity to set themselves only on one task at a time and fail to notice the things around them because they have hyper concentration, hyper fixation. Well, I go through periods like that, but that isn't the only thing about me. And though I can recognize periods of flow like that, I can also give you plenty of examples where I am multitasking between multiple windows on a computer and having a conversation and seeing what's going on. You know, I've been a short order cook and cooked 100 breakfasts for different people before, and that takes a lot of multitasking. So it's really important that people keep their theories guarded from the general public in some circumstances.
I mean, there is a comment, and this has been raised when we talk about research, no matter who's doing it. It's like, who is funding the research and what is the outcome they're looking for? Because in many ways there's been other types of research which we have hammered down, laughed at, been angry about, and it's been funded by someone to push a certain narrative. And I'm not saying Embrace Autism are doing this, but that is the fear out there for many autistic people, that there's a narrative being pushed which would skew the kind of opinions or to skew the how autistic people are perceived. And sometimes it can be harmful for autistic people in terms of start questioning yourself, because as we talked about in an earlier post, the overthinking can come in. And Robbie also, well, Ray, we have to be critical of the orthodoxy. And Robbie says in the text, usually neurotypical people are looking at things from a neurotypical perspective. And other ones which is, obviously harmful if they're not understanding what autism is. The next post is from AUDHD Unfiltered. Health and Wellness website, Canadian Autistic ADHD and Unfiltered. Welcome into my brain in daily life. And they shared the following. You should communicate better. Better how? Louder, softer, with fewer pauses? My words are fine. You just don't like how I say them. You don't like that I don't sugarcoat things, or that I ask direct. You don't like that I don't sugarcoat things. You don't like that I don't sugarcoat things, or that I ask direct questions without performing emotional ballet first. Communication isn't about matching tones. It's about connection. I shouldn't have to translate my entire existence just to be heard. Maybe instead of teaching autistic and ADHD people to speak better, we teach everyone else to actually listen. What's people's thoughts? The kind of thing is a coincidence. This is not a deliberate theme.
Yeah, I think listening should be discussed more. People should consider what listening actually means. It's, um, it's maybe more an experience than a thought.
Many autistic people, and sometimes I feel that myself, especially as in my 20s, where I was a bit more in your face, because I felt I was being unjustly kind of set aside. So I was a bit more in your face, but being middle-aged man's kind of mellowed a bit, even though I will still put my case across. It's just a way of saying it. But the way that I talk, it's not for the way that I speak, the way I communicate, I always try to be fair and speak clearly as I can, depending on what I'm talking about and who I'm talking to, but also learning to listen what's been said back. Sometimes that's difficult. Some people speak in certain ways, especially if it's authoritative. If it's very authoritative, that kind of bends me back a wee bit, because I just can't tolerate that. I don't like that hierarchy thing. I understand there's certain things that need to be said and things need to be done. I understand that, but it's just the way that some people say things, and then there's been many times where people actually tell who I am to me, which is not a very advisable thing to do. But the art of listening, I feel, and I think that I've learned it quite well, although I've got a bit of way to go, is actually more difficult. The art of listening, but also people listening to someone who they feel is not communicating so-called normally. And it's just crazy. I say this all the time. There is no such thing as normal. But people expect this one way of communication or this one way of behaving. And if you appear a little bit different from this so-called normal, you're judged and jumped on like you are the problem. So I do understand this post and the way that it's been expressed.
I used to read a lot about sound artists, and they used to have this concept called deep listening. And what they kind of meant by it was there was a difference between what you were listening to and what you were listening for. That implies that when you're listening, you sometimes come to it with expectations, and that will guide you in what you actually hear. Deeper listening is this kind of thing where you kind of let that go and hear things. And if you put that in the situation of people communicating, then very often we are listening to what someone says with self-intention. We're looking for things that mean something to us in a way. They're what we notice, and we're missing all the other stuff. I'm saying that because I felt that, and that might imply that, well, that's not very autistic, is it? But it's like part of masking, I think, is that you learn to do that in order to get through, say, education and relationships. So there's this implication that true listening is something very uncommon, and we should promote it to a certain extent, or let it be promoted.
There's a lovely comment from Teresa here about her own experience. She says that in situations where my judgmental hackles are raised, I can't listen as well. So I think that illustrates that sometimes we get pushed beyond a position where we're willing to listen at all, because what somebody is saying is so conflicting with our sets of values. She calls it judgment, but it's a conflict with our sets of values, that listening stops, communication stops. Now, because Teresa's expressing that she recognises that happens to her, I'm guessing that in other situations she's a very good listener, and that she, in other situations, is able to try to delve in by listening to what the person is trying to communicate rather than what they're saying, which I think is part of listening, trying to understand how language is difficult to use for somebody to get over what they're trying to convey. It's interesting because a lot of the time we aren't listening. A lot of the time we are merely reacting. We're looking for little bits in what people say so that it cues up what we're going to say next. And I see a lot of social discourse like that, especially small talk. It's very different from making a recording and a podcast and intently listening to what somebody says so that you can ask a question that comes from it. Robbie says, only one person knows what they mean, and that's the person who is speaking. He feels that there's often the assumption that it's always the autistic person that may have misunderstood what has been said. And I think he's right. I think there is a slur against autistic people. We are told that we didn't understand what was said because the person has used words that mean something different from what they were trying to convey. But apparently we're the people who didn't understand. I think that's something we come across. Does anybody else feel like that, like Robbie?
I'm thinking it's a bit like music. It's like we're not playing the standard, the given song. We're off like improvising a wee bit. And in music, you get that true kind of communication where you're, as you say, responding to co-presence, not necessarily just repeating what you're supposed to repeat.
I certainly do feel that if there's a misunderstanding or so-called miscommunication, the autistic person gets the blame because you're not doing it normally. Here we go again, that normal thing. If you do things different, you get the blame, even though you haven't done anything wrong. So then a lot of autistic people will feel victimised, and actually stops a lot of autistic people communicating, interacting, because of the fear of being either judged or even worse, ridiculed.
Yeah, and Ray in the text points out that often we self-deprecate or we compromise because of that difficulty in the communication. Robbie has put some poetry in the text, and it deserves a listen. Oh, sorry, it's Ray that put this in the text. Ray put a piece of poetry in the text. We are in the way and cast a shadow, and we end up just hearing ourselves.
Sounds very true. I can respond with that, or I can connect with that.
We're going over the hour here now.
Well, thank you everyone. It's been a great conversation as always. We've been through quite a lot tonight. But thanks very much for being involved, and thanks for people that have shared those posts that we've talked about tonight and the topics within them. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 30th of November 2025, which is here every Sunday from 5:55pm, 7pm UK time, and I look forward to doing the same next week. Thanks for listening, and now I'll hand over to Jules.
Thank you, Harry. A great group of posts for us to discuss this week. Thank you. Spectrum Voices Conversation, Harry's Facebook page, the 555, is sponsored by coldpack.co.uk. If you're a practitioner in the field that needs cryotherapy for your patients, use coldpack.co.uk because they support the work here at Autistic Radio. If you need a cold pack for your own use, coldpack.co.uk purchases on that site come directly to us in full, supporting the work here at Autistic Radio.